What if the king who lost America was not a tyrant but a victim? History remembers George III as the stubborn monarch who drove 13 colonies to rebellion, yet the truth reveals a far more complex figure, a devoted family man, a patron of science and the arts who descended into madness while his empire crumbled around him. This is the story of a king who wanted to be good, but whose reign became synonymous with loss, illness, and tragedy. Born on the 4th of June 1738 at Norfolk House in London, George William Frederick entered a world of royal expectation. His grandfather, George II, ruled Britain, while his father Frederick, Prince of Wales, prepared for kingship. Yet fate had other plans. When George was just 13 years old, his father died suddenly, thrusting the young prince into the role of heir apparent. Tutored by the Earl of Bute, George received an education emphasizing duty, morality, and absolute monarchy, lessons that would shape his entire reign. In 1760, at the age of 22, George ascended to the throne following his grandfather's death. Unlike the first two Georges who barely spoke English and preferred Hanover to Britain, the young king declared himself born and bred British. He married Princess Charlotte of Mecklenburg-Strelitz, a union that would prove remarkably happy and produce 15 children. The new king had grand ambitions. He would restore royal authority, end political corruption, and lead Britain to greatness. But could good intentions overcome the forces of history? The early years brought military triumph. The 7 Years' War concluded in 1763 with Britain victorious, gaining Canada and dominance in India. George became master of the largest empire the world had seen. He purchased Buckingham House as a private family residence, collected books that would form the foundation of the British Library, and patronized scientists and artists. He even earned the nickname Farmer George for his genuine interest in agricultural innovation. Here was a king who seemed destined for greatness, or so it appeared. Yet across the Atlantic, storm clouds gathered. The American colonies, having helped Britain win the war, now faced new taxes to pay for it. The Stamp Act, the Townshend Acts, taxes on tea, each new levy bred resentment. George believed firmly in parliamentary sovereignty and the colonists' duty to contribute to imperial defense. He could not comprehend why his loyal subjects would refuse. The king saw rebellion where the colonists saw rights. Was this a failure of understanding, or were both sides trapped by incompatible visions of justice? On the 4th of July 1776, the Declaration of Independence shattered any hope of reconciliation. George refused to recognize the rebellion's legitimacy, convinced that firmness would restore order. For 8 years, British forces fought to retain the colonies, but distance, French intervention, and colonial determination proved insurmountable. In 1783, the Treaty of Paris recognized American independence. George considered abdication, so profound was his sense of failure. The king who had inherited the world's greatest empire had presided over its most devastating fracture. Personal tragedy compounded political disaster. In 1788, George suffered his first major bout of illness, what appeared to be madness. He spoke incessantly, became violent, and lost touch with reality. Doctors restrained him with a straitjacket, subjected him to brutal treatments, and kept him isolated. Modern analysis suggests porphyria, a hereditary metabolic disorder causing neurological symptoms, though some historians debate this diagnosis. Whatever the cause, the king who prided himself on duty and rationality found himself imprisoned by his own mind. George recovered, but the illness returned repeatedly. During lucid periods, he continued ruling, supporting the war against Napoleonic France and eventually celebrating victory at Waterloo in 1815. Yet his final decade brought complete darkness, literally. By 1811, blind, deaf, increasingly mad, and mourning his beloved daughter Amelia who had died the previous year, George withdrew entirely from public life. His son ruled as Prince Regent while the old king wandered the corridors of Windsor Castle, lost in a world only he could perceive, sometimes wearing a violet dressing gown he believed to be royal robes. On the 29th of January 1820, George III died at Windsor Castle, having reigned for nearly 60 years, longer than any previous British monarch. He never knew that his granddaughter Victoria would one day rule an empire far greater than the one he lost. History judged him harshly as the king who lost America, yet modern scholarship reveals a more nuanced figure. A devoted husband and father, a patron of enlightenment, a man who genuinely believed in duty but was overwhelmed by forces beyond his control and an illness he could not comprehend. George III's legacy extends beyond the loss of America. His 60-year reign witnessed the Industrial Revolution's beginning, the expansion of British power in India and the Pacific, the abolition of the slave trade, and the defeat of Napoleon. His personal collection formed the king's library, his patronage advanced science and agriculture, and his 15 children spread across European royal houses. Perhaps most importantly, his struggle with mental illness humanized monarchy, revealing that even kings are vulnerable to forces they cannot control. In his tragedy, we see not just the end of an empire, but the very human cost of bearing impossible burdens. Enjoyed the video? Give it a thumbs up and don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more. See you in the next one.